My next guest has a different kind of solution. Mike Grunwald is Time Magazine's senior national correspondent. He wrote a very interesting piece for Time Magazine called One Nation Tax Exempt. His solution is unique. Let's talk to Mike. Mike, welcome. Thanks so much for being with us.
Hey, thanks for having me, David.
Michael, you have a very interesting solution to solve what's going on in the IRS, and you seem to think that none of these organizations should be tax exempt. Help us understand.
Yeah, well, there are 1.6 million tax-exempt organizations in the United States. Harvard University is tax-exempt even though it has a $30 billion endowment, right? I mean, the National Rifle Association and Planned Parenthood is tax-exempt. The Miss America pageant is tax-exempt, the Sierra Club. And remember, you pay taxes when you make money. So just because these groups are nonprofits, if they're not making taxable profits, they wouldn't have to pay taxes anyway. The tax exemption is just a special status, sometimes to help groups, whether it's shield their donors from public view or avoid various restrictions on campaigning or lobbying, and sometimes just to shelter their taxes. So you start to think about it. There's really the entire nonprofit profit sector. You sound like, when I say something like that these groups should not be tax exempt, it sounds like I hate soup kitchens or churches, or Kevin Durant's foundation. We realize a lot of them just exist as they're tax shelters, like so many other tax shelters on the books, and really they should be taxed like normal groups. And if you don't like taxes, then we should reduce tax rates across the board. But there's really not much of a rationale for allowing these kind of huge dodges, essentially.
Mike, when I was reading your article, one of the things you pointed out that I found very interesting, you talk about charities as well, and you mentioned some notable charities, cancer charities, charities for the young, but some of the directors of these charities are making millions of dollars. That would indicate to me that these charities are maybe don't have the best interests of the people they're trying to protect.
I wouldn't even say that. I would say, if you want to be a charity and pay people whatever you want, go for it. And if you're a good cause, I wish you luck, and people should give you money. But they just shouldn't receive any particular tax benefits for doing that. The charitable deduction, which only goes to people who itemize their taxes, which means people who generally make a fair amount of money, that costs the government $50 billion a year. Or you can say that's $50 billion that you could just lower taxes across the board. Again, I'm not coming out to say that half of these charities are bogus, or that none of them are doing good work, or that they all pay their executives too much. They should be able to make those choices themselves. They really I don't understand why the government has to be involved in giving them special protections.
What kind of money are we talking about here? Has anybody run the numbers here? I'm from finance, so I'd like to know how much money is being lost to the Treasury.
Well, sure. Just from the charitable deduction, right? That's just from when people itemize their taxes and they wanted to build a wing in the hospital, or they set up like Alex Rodriguez setting up some bogus foundation that never gives any money to charity and just puts all of his family on the payroll. Those kind of deductions cost the government directly about $50 billion a year. But then you got to remember that this entire nonprofit sector is sort of, it kind of exists. That doesn't include, for example, to take Harvard, which has a $30 billion endowment that makes returns every year, and those returns are not taxable because it can plow the money into education or its lucrative merchandising operation, selling everybody Harvard T-shirts. That's not included in that $50 billion. So we're talking, a few billion here, a few billion there, right? Pretty soon you're talking
Mike,
about real money.
There's two things here in this article that really caught my eye. You mentioned, and you just mentioned one of them, Alex Rodriguez, that his tax-exempt organization or nonprofit or whatever it is, wasn't that disallowed?
It was fine. I mean, they were so egregious. He was giving less than 1% of his donations, to actual things that looked anything like charity. So they actually did lose their exemption. But that's incredibly rare.
So what's the drawing line here? You said less than 1%. When is a charity really not a charity and just a way to collect money for you and your family?
Well, I guess what I would say is that I'd rather not have IRS agents tasked with figuring that out, because as you seem to suggest, that's a really hard thing, right? We're asking a lot of these bureaucrats to try to figure out what's a social welfare organization and what's just a political front. The reason they're tasked to do that is because of these tax advantages that go to these 501c3s and C4s and 3.5s.
Can I hold you on that a second, Mike?
Yeah.
Because we hear those terms all the time, this 501c4.
Yeah.
It gets pretty complicated. Can you walk us through some of the intricacies of that?
Sure. I mean, the simple explanation would be that 501c3 is like the basic charity or a foundation.
Wow.
501c4, that's these alleged social welfare
and that's
organizations.
these super PACs that we hear about all the time, the
right,
super PACs, the political organizations.
Right, like Karl Rove's group has a 501c4 that runs ads, saying that Democrats are bad and Obamacare is bad, but that's a social welfare organization. The Sierra Club is a social welfare organization. Right. Planned Parenthood. So. Then there are a few other,
Wow.
unions. There's a thing for unions are tax exempt. I think that's C5.
All right, we get the picture, Mike.
It goes on and on.
It's pretty complex.
Yeah,
it is pretty complex.
These are always. Remember, like I said in the piece, that for a while my wife had a nonprofit. It was an unintentional nonprofit. It was a retail business, but she didn't pay any taxes when she wasn't making any money.
She didn't make money.
Right? Now,
that's
so
great.
Like the Chamber of Commerce shouldn't pay any taxes if it's not making any money either.
Okay.
The only reason it needs nonprofit status is if it needs to shelter some of the money it's making.
Mike, a great